unlimited power! Hi, Zizaran here with another Crackling Lance build guide. Last time it fell a little flat because of some interactions that GGG showed in the video didn't actually work like the way they showcased it, and it was just a little bit like weaker. So for the last Crackling Lance guide, it was just throw ball, lightning, or arc on it and it was better. It was still fine and could do all the content, but it wasn't really what we were hoping for a new skill. This time, however, Crackling Lance is getting a large buff and Inquisitor is looking really cool. Fanaticism faces a lot of the issues. And this is actually going to be a joint build guide because it's kind of for Ball Lightning and for Crackling Lance. So you have a good choice here. Ball Lightning is just insanely strong and actually might end up being the better one, but I wanted to make sure that I had like an explanation for both because they're both really cool lightning skills. So I figured I would show off generally how the build is played. Very much difficult for this build since it doesn't really exist yet. Now, this is pretty much what the build's gonna look like during the leveling process. Endgame would be even harder because, for example, Fanaticism, which is a big part of the build, and its cast speed isn't in the game yet, so I have no way of showing that. But this is basically Spell Slinger, so you're running around with Frenzy, and it'll look a lot better than this because the gems will actually be leveled. So when you do get to Blood Aqueduct, you'll probably be one-shotting everything. But you can see the Wave of Commission, the Arc, and the Ball Lightning are all just like annihilating everything in front of you. Very fun to play. And as for how to play the actual like self-cast part later, because this build respects into like more self-cast and you use Spell Slinger for leveling, that'll basically be like while mapping, it'll be a lot like this, just shield charging and blasting, and you'll have the Fanaticism buff up a lot of the time. On bosses, you are going to require to move a lot, and for like especially lower HP bosses, you can kind of pre-charge your Fanaticism before running in, and then just like burst the boss down really quickly. It should be really cool. And another thing for the endgame part as well, we are going to be using Orb of Storms. The way this works is that it keeps proccing whenever you're casting a lightning skill inside of it. We are going to be casting our lightning skill something like 10 times per second. And that's gonna like keep proccing the Orb of Storms. So you basically throw down your Orb of Storms and then go to town and burst. So if you've never followed one of our guides before, make sure you check out the video that explains that, well, you know, we're using the community fork, for example. So maybe if your PoB isn't loading, make sure you check out the video. It explains everything. Everything is normal where we do the step-by-step handholdy stuff to make sure that you know what skill points to do at what level. So we do our skill groups like normal as well. Here we have like very simple leveling this time. It's just Stormblast, Mine, and Orb of Storms. And that's pretty much fine all the way until you get Spell Slinger. Early on you do use Heralds as well. We later don't because all your reservation is going to be for Spell Slinger. Your movement skill is early on Frostblink gets replaced by Flame Dash. And then you don't have to use Smoke Mine and Flame Dash. It's fine to just use one movement ability. But a lot of people do enjoy using both. Once we move over to Spell Slinger, I like switching around 31, but you can switch as early as 24. I don't think you get Frenzy as a Templar, so you would basically just have to default attack until you get to the Library quest. Once you've done the Library quest, you can switch to Frenzy. I quite like doing Frenzy and faster attacks. Then later, once you're level 38, you get Conductivity and Hex Touch. There's no reason to use like Barrage support on this build because it's not like Volatile and Desecrate, where on that build you actually want to keep proccing the cast. So that doesn't matter on this. It's completely fine to just do it like this. Faster attacks just makes it feel a little bit better. But do remember, you also don't technically need any leftover mana on this build. You could just walk around and default attack. And if you do run out of mana, your default attack will still be proccing your Spell Slinger. Once you get around level 50 and your Spell Slinger is level 10 on all of them, you should be able to put in at least a 1-link arc. If you like feel like your movement ability is kind of hard to do, something that works is you could do an Enduring Mana Flask, then you should still be able to use your movement abilities like normal. But again, it's really nice that you don't need mana on this build, right? Even if you're default attacking, you're still attacking with full potential. Until we get level 38, then you're just self-casting Conductivity on bosses for a little bit extra single target. You don't have that much damage early on. For the endgame, you can see here that you have a choice between Ball Lightning or Crackling Lance. And there's actually a very big difference between these two. So on Crackling Lance, you're using Intensify, and that stacks with the skills built in Intensify, which with the amount of casts we're getting should stack up very, very quickly. If you are playing Ball Lightning, you don't really want this node. The reason is it is still really, really good damage, but only if you have, for example, a helmet enchant with +1 projectile. The reason for this is we're using the pinpoint support, so if you have this with no additional projectiles, when you reach max intensity, you've lost all your projectiles. So you have loads of damage, but no projectiles to actually deal damage with. This isn't the case for Crackling Lance, so for Crackling Lance, you do want intensity. Both the builds use Orb of Storms. Like I said earlier, you basically like pop this down when you want additional single targets, stand inside the circle while attacking with, Crackling Lance or Ball Lightning, and your Orb of Storms is going to keep proccing. So, aura-wise, we're using Vitality and Wrath. Vitality is really, really good. And we'll go over I'll talk all about the Inquisitor's defenses. If you're on softcore and you're struggling a lot on mana, the first thing you could drop is Flesh and Stone. Later, it's also going to be very, very easy to drop Flesh and Stone, because part of the plan is to blind your enemies with Disorienting Display, which makes it easy to drop all the Sovereignty and Reduced Reservation nodes. But until then, I would keep Flesh and Stone, as it's a really, really nice form of defense, but that's the easiest thing to drop on softcore. Late game, you still want to get Arcane Surge now and again, so we have Flame Dash with Arcane Surge, your self-casting conductivity until you have Curse on hit. Now, we have a trigger wand here. I probably wouldn't even bother with any of these gems, except for Wave of Conviction, until you get a trigger wand. You get these by Betrayal, and it'll look like the red text here. Trigger a socketed spell when you use the skill, and that is a Betrayal, tier 6 map and higher unveil. So Wave of Conviction, really, really nice, and we should have so much lightning damage and lightning damage scaling that it should always do more lightning damage. The reason we have both Cold Snap and Blade Blast in a trigger wand is Cold Snap is a really nice way to passively generate frenzy charges. It also chills the boss or anything and will, make them lose some, they'll slow down a bit. Blade Blast is actually very, very strong because this is unnerve enemies for 4 seconds on hit. So when you do hit a unnerve on something, it's going to take 10% more spell damage. Shield Charge is very core for this build because that's how we're going to be building our Fanaticism charges endgame. We'll talk about that in a bit. Remember that you can have any instant skill on mouse button 1 and it's still going to work as your normal move only. So I do Steel Skin as high level as you can get it. Hopefully you should have somewhere 80 to 130 strength and maybe have it at least level 15 or something. So let's talk a little bit about the Inquisitor and how you ascend is exactly here. So we would go for you take the Instruments of Virtue first. That's because we're leveling with Spell Slinger, and I can explain a little bit more on Spell Slinger. The way that works is similar to Battle Mage, where if you have, let's look at our early game one, if you have 4 to 75 lightning damage to attacks, it's basically turning that into 4 to 75 lightning damage to spells. Now, Spell Slinger scales as you level it, so level 21 will basically be 1-to-1, whereas early on in Spell Slinger, it's around half. Right now, this would be 2 to 35 or 2 to 37 lightning damage to spells. So it's really, really nice for some additional damage while leveling early game. We completely ignore the attack damage. We're not using that at all. Now, our second and third Ascendancy is going to be Sanctuary and Pious Path. This is just a straight up damage buff. The best way to look at this is the enemies are taking 15% more damage because it's the only increased the enemies are taking. So this is really, really strong. Pious Path is absolutely insane, and let's talk a little bit about it. What this does is it basically doubles your life regen, because if you have 700 life regen, you're not getting percentage-based ES regen. You're also getting 700 energy shield regen. That means that even if you have as little as 200 energy shield, you'd actually get a very significant defense against degens and stuff like that there. So it's really, really nice for that. So because of that, in this build, we do actually want to go fairly decent hybrid. And when I've been playing around with these builds, I've been able to get as much as 1.5k life regen, meaning I also get 1.5k ES regen for a total of 3k. That's very, very heavy sustain, especially against degens. And it's kind of nice because on a hybrid build, it's sometimes very annoying that you're taking chaos damage through your energy shield and you don't always see it. The health bar is a little bit scuffed. And, since the life bar is under the energy shield, at least if you have the thing enabled that's in the middle of the screen, it's sometimes hard to see. So it's a little bit quality of life there. Another really good thing about Pious Path is that the effect lingers. That means that when you're stepping outside of the consecrated ground, it stays on you. And it makes you elemental ailment immune. That means that you don't need heat flask for freeze immunity, you don't need grounding for shock immunity, etc. It's a really, really strong thing. Now, the last ascendancy we do, and this also prompts a respec in the build. It shouldn't be like a huge respec on the tree, but there will be some changes. So Instruments of Zeal, and why this is so cool, is you're basically getting 1 charge per second. So it doesn't matter if you're spam shield charging, you're not going to get charges faster, but every second that you have attacked in, you're getting 1 charge. Once you have 4, you get Fanaticism for 4 seconds. This is 75% more cast speed, reduced mana cost, and increased area of effect. This is really good for both the skills that we're using. It's good for Ball Lightning because, well, cost speed, amazing. Reduced mana cost, amazing. And 75% in KoE, huge for Ball Lightning since it lets it hit multiple times. Another good thing to note, there's been some people thinking that Fanaticism is on for 4 seconds and then off for 4 seconds. While realistically, at least for mapping, it should be up most of the time because you're most likely shield charge, hit, shield charge, hit, shield charge, hit, and you're already gaining charges while the buff is active. This is also showcased in the video that they had. You know, hopefully it's right this time, right? Right? For bosses, and in general, it's going to take some getting used to because you do want to get into a nice rhythm where you do have the buff up as much as possible. And that's a little bit hard to predict before actually playing the build. And let's talk a little bit about Spellslinger. The really nice thing about it for leveling and stuff is that pretty much every wand, everything is good, right? If you're getting lightning damage to attacks, well, that's pretty great. We're using lightning damage to attacks. That's basically spell damage. And what's really nice about it is that the rolls on lightning damage to attacks is higher than lightning damage to spells. If you get lightning damage to spells, that's also great. We are using spells. If you get percentage spell damage, that's really good too. So, like, it's so much easier to find a wand when you don't need to just get spell damage or just get lightning damage to spells. Pretty much every wand is fairly usable. And then lightning spell skill gems is really good as well. For our early game, it's basically all just life, and then you would put in resists wherever you need that. Do try to get resist kept as early as possible, and remember that you lose resist at both Act 5 and Act 10 Kitava. Ideally, you want to be resist kept by at least Act 4. For our medium one, we're just like upping the ante a little bit. Now, ones like this should be very, very easy to make on item level 2 driftwood ones. All you would use is the flat lightning damage to attacks essence, which I believe is called Wrath, and then you use that until you hit +1 lightning spell skill gems. That would already make a really, really good one, because now, hopefully you have an open prefix and you can just craft spell damage. This is on a worse base, but that's only costing us 30 spell damage. That's not the end of the world. On a shield, if you can get 70, 80 life with +1 lightning spell skill gems, that would be really, really good. We're starting to focus a little bit more on hybrid now. Ideally, we want to have over 10k raw HP on this build. Here's an example of a really nice chest and something you could work with later as well. This is an incursion chest. It has a mod called Guatzalitzis. So the 114 life and 10% increased max life is actually inside the same role. The way you find these, you either find them in the incursion temple or from things where you have like the armor reward from Metamorph, Delirium, and they also drop in Heist, etc. One of the best crafts is something you have to unveil, and this is an unveil discovered specifically by Cravicious items. Gain up to 10% of max life as extra max energy shield. So that makes it all the stuff we're investing into life anyway becomes even more energy shield, which is perfect for our build. Not really anything special on gloves or boots. Here on an amulet, you could start thinking about getting life leech in the form of an incursion amulet. Same way to get them as the chest. And yeah, this is an example of a good one. Now, do remember for farming incursion items that in Lex Iores on the Atlas now, we can upgrade our Atlas with Time Dilation, which is Incursion Architects drop 1 additional rare incursion item. Makes it a lot easier to find chests like these and also amulets like that. Something that would be really nice as early as possible, try to get a scuffed ring with a conductivity on hit. It's really nice to have conductivity on all your enemies without having to self-curse. It is slightly weaker for a single target, but the quality of life far outweighs that. The way you find this is in Delve, you're going to find, it'll say, contains lightning items, or area contains lightning items, and when you go there, there's a chance that there will be a ring reward, and the ring has like a 50-50 chance to have conductivity on it. So pretty easy to get these in Delve, and you do want to craft a better one later on a Crusader ring. Now, another thing here, and you could just use a normal belt, but Replica Soul Tether is really cool for this build. What it gives us is Corrupted Soul. So if we see here, Corrupted Soul is basically, it's kind of similar to Mind Over Matter, where 50% of non-chaos damage taken bypasses Energy Shield, but you gain 20% maximum life as extra maximum Energy Shield. And this is really nice because our life regen is spread, so spreading the damage between two when we're regenning on both is very powerful. Now there's two ways to get Corrupted Soul. You can get a Glorious Vanity in the name of Dariani, and then you could put that, for example, down here. It's going to crangle that life node, and those strength nodes here is going to be changed into something else, but the Agnostic will then become Corrupted Soul. And these are found by doing the Legion Monoliths, and you obviously have to do the Val one. Now if we look at the Flasks here, you generally want a Seething Divine Life Flask of Staunching, but this build is already ailment immune, so the normal things like getting freeze immunity, shock immunity, etc. you don't have to bother with on this build. You only need to get immunity to bleed, and you want to get curse immune. And if you want to take it one step further, you can also remove the need for bleed immunity just by getting a jewel where you can corrupt it, and the implicit has a chance to be immunity to corrupting blood. And then you don't really need bleed immunity as much anymore. We have a couple of different unique flasks we can use. Cinder Swallow is really good. Obviously, since we're doubling regen, this is giving us 6% regen, and the recovery on life and energy shield is going to feel extremely good while clearing. We don't really have a way of igniting with this build, but that doesn't matter. The recovery is so nice. The Wise Oak is an extremely strong flask, and let me tell you a little bit about how this works. So, in-game Path of Exile, you see you have two brackets here. You have the left one, which doesn't matter, and you have the right one, which does matter. The way Wise Oak would work for me right now if I used it on this character is I would deal more fire damage and I would take less lightning. However, if I can balance all of these three to say, for example, 115, 115, 115, I will deal more all of the damage, and I'll also take less on all of the damage. So if you just want to deal damage on the build that we're showing you right now, all you want to make sure is that your lightning resist is the highest. Other than that, Granite Flask is really good. You're gonna get hit by a lot of stuff, so you're probably not gonna go evasion with Jade on this build, but a Granite Flask is gonna help you with a lot of the smaller hits you're gonna be taking. You also want to make sure that you have a Quicksilver of Adrenaline on the build to make sure that you're not super slow. We're also going to make a jewel for this build that shows, especially for Trade League, what are all the good stats you can get on jewels. And in the notes, we're going to have like a PoE trade search to buy jewels for Trade League for you easier. Now, if we look at the end game, I've chosen to go with the Profane Wand. I really like the idea of like spamming cast speed. We see with what I have, we're getting almost 10 casts per second, which is interesting because we actually might start having some mana issues without Fanaticism online. When Fanaticism is on, we don't really have any mana issues because it's doing the 75% reduced. However, without it, we actually might be struggling a little bit. That's one thing I'm worried about for this build. You might need to get a few pieces with mana regen, but as soon as Fanaticism is online, your mana should be fine. Worst case scenario, just drop the Flesh and Stone, and that should leave you with a lot of mana. For the rest of the gear, I've gone with some extreme examples here because we do have Harvest back in the game, so getting stuff like this isn't that crazy anymore. Shield is basically just high spell damage, cast speed, and lightning spell skill gems. And for this build, there's no difference between elemental damage, spell damage, and lightning damage for the most part. Something that could be really cool here is to do an Essence of Horror on a helmet, and it's just 30% more damage for your Orb of Storm, so a little bit extra single target. We've gone a little further on an incursion chest here, and we multi-modded. So we have the built-in incursion mod, the life and life, and then we have max life as an extra energy shield and another percentage life, both of which the last two are all betrayal crafts. Boots as well, just more life, more resists, more movement speed. Amida, however, we can get quite a lot of damage here. We have +1 lightning skill gems we can get lightning penetration, and cast speed would be a pretty good stat as well, and obviously life. Even getting high energy shield or percentage energy shield is not a bad idea. I would definitely recommend trying to get a Vermilion ring. If you can use some Fertile Catalyst to get even more life before you craft it, that would be excellent. If you're able to get like 7 or 8k life on this build, you should be pretty tanky and you'll have a decent amount of regen. And at this point, you want to start getting a conductivity as well. On a belt, you can now either go between the Replica Soul Tether or a Glorious Vanity. Both should be fairly easy to acquire even in Soul Self-Fun in this league. And you can see Glorious Vanity here is switching the Agnostic to be Corrupted Soul. And we're losing this 5% life node. Here are the calculations I did when doing this. So this is assuming that Fanaticism is up, which is a large part of our damage. And it's also assuming that the boss is Cyrus. So if you're just blasting random stuff, you should have pretty crazy damage on Crackling Lance. Now, at the time of making this video, Crackling Lance isn't updated in PoE. So here it would be more like level 24 or something like that. Maybe 25. Because currently it has like the old flat lightning damage and the old damage effectiveness, both which are getting buffed, so it should be really, really cool. And whether you end up with Ball Lightning or Crackling Lance, both of them should be pretty good choices, especially on softcore. The Bandit for this build is skill points, you just kill them all, there is no need for a Lyra or anything like that, and the Pantheon is Soul of Solaris and Soul of Shakari. A really good endgame Annoint for this build is Heart of Thunder. Other than that, Static Blows is pretty cheap. Then you kind of want to reconsider using Elemental Focus, because your Orb of Storms isn't going to be enough. Diamond Skin is a very, very cheap one for just resists in early game. It's down here. And then you also have Prodigal Perfection is very, very cheap and a decent amount of damage. Plus, it'll help some with the mana issues that we will most likely be having. Another thing I want to mention for this build as well is the Cluster Jewel part. Now, this is very, very large for our damage. We're not playing an Archmage build, so the damage differential between the low end and the high end is extremely high. What Supercharge does is that it rolls the lightning damage you're dealing twice and chooses the higher number. So for a build like this, it's an insane amount of damage. I would use this even if it's like an 11 or 12 pointer probably. And the two nodes that you really want is Disorienting Display and Supercharge. Disorienting Display on this build, you'll basically have a permanent aura of blind around you. And something that's really, really cool for this build is Surging Vitality. Two of these is basically 40% life regen over 1 second every 4 seconds. So it's kind of like you're just automatically popping a life potion now and again because, you know, you're getting 20% life regen, but also 20% energy shield regen. So let's do a little bit of the Q&A I do at every end of the build guide. Are there too many gems to equip? No, I've made sure that it should be pretty much perfect. You shouldn't need any unset rings. It pretty much goes into your gloves, helmet, boots just perfectly. So that should be fine. Can the player have mana issues? I don't know. It does look a little bit scary without the Fanaticism charges up. So I would try to get into the groove, keeping that up with nearly as much uptime as possible. And you might end up having to invest a little bit more into mana than I've thought. But that's just something you're going to have to play by ear. Things that are going to be useful for leveling is very much your standard stuff. And do remember things like Barrack rings, like Barrack's grip, etc. are really, really good for leveling if it's like your second or third character. And usually very cheap on Trade League. Other than that, your normal stuff like Tabula, Gold Rim, etc. Tabula isn't really that big for this build, especially early, because you don't want to 6-link anything. As far as sustain and defense for this build, you do get a large amount of raw HP. I can see people very easily ending up with as much as 7 or 8k life and even 5k energy shield, which is a large amount. However, the only thing we're relying on here is then going to be our like 2k regen and the Surging Vitality, putting it to like 3 or 4k regen now and again. That's cool, but it is a little bit scary as well. So for hardcore and bossing, it might be a little bit scary. It should be more than enough for softcore and should be an amazing build to play. As far as auras and stuff you're running, the most important aura you can run for this build is Vitality because it double dips and it works on your energy shield and your life. And there's no really special mechanics that make this build work. As far as drawbacks, the biggest drawback of this build is that I'm a little bit worried about how it's going to like be against like very dangerous bosses like Uber Elder, Uber Ziri, and things like that. But for so many players, especially people starting out, it should be an amazing build that should feel really good. If you guys try out this build and you like it or you don't like it, make sure you comment down below. Let us know how we can do better in the future. There's going to be a lot more League starters coming, and I hope this one does well for you. Good luck in 3.13. Sub if you like the content, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.